couple of these other questions. A flower is simply a weed with an advertising budget. What does that mean, Rory?
Signaling is often necessary in a economics doesn't understand. Well, economics came up with, in part, the concept of signaling, although partly borrowed it from biology. But in many cases, it is necessary. And my point is that advertising is 20 million years old. You know, and pollinated flowers have been kicking around for at least 20 million years. And in order to convince a bee that it is worth investigating, you have to actually advertise yourself. And the extent to which you spend money on petals is proof of your confidence in the long-term value of what you have to offer. So people use advertising as a heuristic for knowing whom to trust.
Okay, that's really good. Don't design for average.
No, innovation tends to happen around the edges. So if you design for the very middle of a market, you end up in an overcrowded field. The people who successfully innovate are the people who actually, I'll give you a lovely example of this. BT developed a phone with huge buttons intended for people who are basically blind.
Yeah, I remember.
Now, the thing to remember is designing for the disabled is a really good philosophy because most of us are kind of disabled a lot of the time. So if you're standing on a train, you lose the use of one arm because you've got to hold on to something. It's now mandated that you have door handles rather than door knobs in buildings so that people with no hands can open the door with an elbow. Now, actually, someone carrying 2 mugs of tea effectively has no hands. So looking at people and designing for people under particular constraints, or, for example, frequent users are often very, very different. So 10 people who buy your product 100 times a year are very different from 100 people who buy your product 10 times a year. That's why you need Amazon Prime, okay? So Amazon Prime is a classic example of not designing for average, because Amazon Prime is the realization that, and I think interestingly, Bezos was already a billionaire when he introduced Amazon Prime.
I think so.
And he came across huge opposition within the organization. But I think his point was very simple. He probably felt, even if you're a billionaire, okay, 10 people don't mind paying £3 for delivery once a month. No one, however rich, is really going to be happy paying £3 to delivery 10 times a month. And therefore, if you want to have frequent customers, you have to have some mechanism where they can pay for all the delivery in one shot.
Okay, and that was the outer edge.
Yeah.
This one I don't understand. The opposite of a good idea can also be a good idea.
Hugely important, because by modeling social science on physics, we think that being scientific means being like your high school science class, where there was a right answer and a wrong answer, and you could go 3.7, tick. Anything that wasn't 3.7 was wrong, right? In marketing, 1, the rules of the game aren't constant. 2, you can rewrite them. 3, by changing the context, you can change what good means. So, to give you an example, not far from here, there used to be a restaurant in Chinatown called Wong Ki. Do you remember it?
No.
It was a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, famous for being the rudest restaurant in London. Now,
Okay.
normally,
No,
being rude in a restaurant is a bad idea, okay? Just as, for example, saying that gravity acts upwards in physics means you'll make some really dumb decisions. But if you actually make your rudeness part of your proposition and people expect it in advance, then weirdly being rude in a restaurant can be a benefit, not a cost.
So that means it's another good idea.
Yeah, so Red Bull.
Opposite.
Red Bull's a classic example. It's the opposite of Coke. It tastes disgusting, comes in a tiny can. In all those respects, you can take the opposite of something and people like it. I would argue, for example, if you take hotel check-in, a really smooth automated hotel check-in is great. You know, where I just take my mobile phone up to room 307 and open the door. I think that was really cool. I also think that the Mandarin Hotel in Hong Kong, where someone walks you up to your room and makes you a cup of tea and a pot of tea in your room while you fill in the check-in forms, that's also a great form of hotel check-in.
Right.
What isn't good is the middle.
Yeah.
As I also often say, there's a bargain and there's an extravagant treat. Okay? We don't get an endorphin rush from mid-market retail. The Henry is a great vacuum cleaner. The Dyson is a great vacuum cleaner. Okay.
Yeah, no, understood.
So the idea that we're trying to optimize something is fundamentally mistaken, and therefore we're using the wrong maths and the wrong mindset in making marketing decisions if we assume only that our job is to be the best at something. And if we define ourselves by our competitors, we'll be even worse, because we're trying to be better at something that a lot of people are already good at. What's the point of doing that? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the person who understands this best in the business world, if you want to read a business book, and mine is only partly a business book, Peter Thiel, or Thiel. I know Americans pronounce German words in a weird way, but
0 to 1.
It's 0 to 1 is a great, great book. He understands this stuff absolutely brilliantly. You know, your purpose is not to be a great competitor. Your purpose is to create a kind of mental monopoly in some space. Right. It's to create a monopoly, essentially, so that you have monopoly pricing power and actually can, operate like a great business can and innovate and take long-term decisions. The second you're trying to be competitive, to be honest, the future health of your business is already in doubt, because you're driven by short-termism and the whims of the market.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Don't be dare to be trivial. Rule number 10.
Yeah, the way to solve a problem may be surprisingly trivial and silly. And our attempts in business to make ourselves look serious and important by always talking about higher order things we've read in The Economist, okay, may actually make us stupid. What you need to do is change. Sometimes all you need to do is do a very small butterfly effect change, and actually you can. But by the way, the opposite is also true. That big inputs can have small effects. Small inputs can have big effects. That's why human behaviour, i.e., complex behaviour, isn't like high school science.
Okay. If there were a logical answer, we would have found it. What does that mean? That
means that by and large, the remaining problems tend to be problems that are logic proof. This isn't the Middle Ages. There were a lot of problems in the Middle Ages which hadn't been solved because no one had brought a logical approach to them.
Correct.
In many respects, there are certain inventions which are weirdly late to emerge. Okay? But I would argue in the modern age, replete as it is with management consultants and economists and hyper-rational politicians, for that matter, the problems that actually persist are likely to be those problems which can't be solved by what you might call direct, non-oblique, non-creative, proportionate intervention.
Right. And on that same note, you have one rule, rule number 8, test counterintuitive things only because no one else will.
Yeah, because information that you know and everybody else doesn't know is much more valuable in creating a kind of monopoly than information that everybody knows.
Okay. All right. So this is really about going against the grain. Number 6, the problem with logic is it kills off magic.
Definition of trying to make something scientific is the first assumption of a science is that magic is impossible. Absolutely true in physics, not true in psychology. You can solve. There is magic possible in psychology. You can make something worth 10 times as much money, essentially, simply by tweaking with the brain, not the thing itself.